been spending this almost a year and a half now, and going chapter by chapter through my book, 12 Essential Insights. And we're on the 12th insight about holding on to ourselves in relationship. And we're going to be, exploring relationships and what goes on in families and stuff for quite a while because it's really the essence of what this is all about is in terms of what happens, how we show up, and how we function in our relationships. And last couple times, first of all, I introduced this concept that we all have a strong desire for connection, for togetherness. I call it the we inside of us. We want to be connected. We want to join. We want union. At the same time, we also have a strong need for separateness, to be our own person, for our individuality, not independence, but we want to talk about independence, but really it's better to think of the word autonomy in relationship to emotional sobriety. I think because independence gets kind of confusing with I don't need anyone. And that's not at all what we're talking about when we talk about, balancing the we and the I inside of us, or balancing the need for togetherness and for separateness. And last week we explored the Beavers Timberline Family Evaluation Rating Scale and how to think about the process, what's going on, and how a family is functioning in terms of the structure of that family, the mood of that family, how effective that family is in solving problems. And as I said to you before, we could take every one of those dimensions and relate it to ourselves individually. Like that first dimension of chaos or rigidity or egalitarian kind of leadership. And if you think about that in relationship to the different parts of ourselves, all of those things, and that's kind of the argument that internal family systems makes sense in terms of our relationship with ourselves. So that's another way to go ahead and look at that Beavers Timberline family rating scale. But what I want to talk about today are Dr. Kempler's idea about what a healthy relationship is. Because we want to have some sense of what is it that we're striving for. Now, you're going to see in this discussion, as you did last week, that that when there are, well, let me start it this way. When we are undifferentiated, then the way we show up in this world is to have a lot of expectations and demands about how things are supposed to be. I've mentioned this before, but it's worth repeating, is that one way of getting a sense, kind of in a general way, about where you're at in terms of your level of differentiation is to think about how many times during the day do you use the word should? And when you're interacting with other people or when you're talking about things that you need to do in your life. Do you find yourself saying, I should do this now or I should do that? It would be good if, or other people, you should do this or you should be this way. The more shoulds that exist in your life, the more undifferentiated you are. And the more shoulds that exist in your life for yourself are also it's going to parallel the number of shoulds you have for how other people are supposed to behave. Shoulds and supposed tos are kissing cousins. They really are the same thing. Um, so one way of getting a sense of where you stand on your level of maturity is how many shoulds you have. So I want you to pay attention as I go through this list of what a healthy relationship is. I want you to pay attention to how much room there exists in a healthy relationship. Excuse me. My asthma's really been working up lately. I got a cold and now it always turns into this asthmatic reaction. Um, So, what we say in a healthy family, there's room for two people. In a healthy relationship, there's room for two people. And the people become more important than the rules. So, let's start out. What is a healthy relationship? Well, a healthy relationship is when personal language, and I'm going to define what personal language is in a moment, but we can operationalize it with words like no, yes, I want, I don't want, I don't like, I will or I won't. That's the essence of speaking to someone personally. Notice I'm not saying things like, you should do this, or things like, I can't do that. Is we're replacing all of those things where we're not taking responsibility for what we want and what we'd like by now assigning it to some kind of higher authority, like the Ten Commandments. You should be this way. So, in a healthy relationship, personal language is the cornerstone of our conversation. It's taught, it's taught through example, it's appreciated and encouraged through our example. So, personal language, saying no, yes, I want, I don't want, I like, I don't like, I will, I won't, is the cornerstone of conversation. It's taught, appreciated, and encouraged by example alone. A healthy relationship is when that relationship is shaped by the reality of who each person is and not according to an ideal of how a relationship should look or how we should behave. I'll say that again. A healthy relationship is a relationship that's shaped by the reality of who each of us are and who each of us is, and not according to an ideal of how a relationship should look and how we should behave in a relationship. A healthy relationship is that when we understand that our deepest desires have to do with our struggle between the we and the I, between togetherness and separateness, and to understand that every conflict we have, no matter how small an issue it is a negotiation of our level of intimacy. It's a negotiation of how much separateness and how much togetherness is going to exist in our relationship. And the level of intimacy that's going to be created has to do with how well we struggle with that negotiation. Rarely, if ever, will people line up in terms of the amount of togetherness they want or the amount of separateness they want. And the other thing is, rarely will people line up in terms of that we'll be in the same place in terms of wanting to be together or versus wanting our separateness. Now, research has shown it's been kind of interesting because we could call that being in sync, couldn't we? Well, research has shown that people are in sync only a third of the time. And so, if our expectation is that we should, if you love someone, you should be in sync most of the time, you're setting yourself up. Another third of the time, research has shown that we're out of sync trying to get back in sync. And the last third of the time is we're just separate. We're out of sync and not interested in being in sync. We just want to be separate. Now, we can look at this two ways. Either two-thirds of the times we're separate and a third of the time we're connected, meaning together, or two-thirds of the time we're connected or trying to be connected, and a third of the time we're separate. But the point is here that there has to be room for movement between those two poles, between the togetherness and the separateness, without seeing that movement as a threat to our connection. I will never forget the first time I heard Dr. Kempler say that separateness is not a disruption of connection. It's just another dimension of it. Well, it took me a while to wrap my head around what that meant. But when I figured it out, I realized how brilliant that was, how much wisdom existed, because both sides of that, the togetherness and the separateness, are important parts of a relationship and important parts of our connection. A healthy relationship is when partners see differences as desirable. Wow. Now think about that. See, if I'm undifferentiated, then my differences with you become a threat to my togetherness. Because I operate from this unconscious ideas that we have to think the same, have the same values, have the same beliefs for us to be close. And the opposite is true. True intimacy is created when we respect our differences, not demand similarity. We see this all the time, and especially with this election that happened. I know a lot of people right now that have gone to marriage counseling because one person voted one way and the other person voted the other way. And it's created a lot of struggle because they don't have any way of dealing with these differences and seeing them as desirable. A healthy relationship is one where we see struggle as beneficial. Now, to see struggle as beneficial is you do have to do what I titled this chapter, hold on to yourself. Because when we struggle with a person, and there's always going to be struggle, there's always going to be differences that need to be negotiated. There's always going to be differences in terms of how much togetherness and separateness we want. There's going to be all kinds of things that naturally occur in the course of being with someone that are going to cause tension. A healthy relationship is not a relationship that has an absence of tension, but it's one that uses that tension to forge a greater connection. Now, to be able to do that, you have to be able to add more of yourself when you're in conflict. Most people don't know how to do that. Most people end up compromising to deal with conflict, and that's the exact opposite. Compromise is a cheap form of cooperation. True, healthy cooperation is cooperation with integrity. Nobody compromises, right? Back to the personal language. I cooperate with you because I want to, not because I'm supposed to. Compromise usually occurs out of a should. You should compromise in a relationship. Now, the other thing about struggle that's beneficial is the ability to tolerate discomfort. And, those of us that are in here have not been great at having a great threshold in terms of being able to deal with our discomfort and especially our anxiety. A healthy relationship is a relationship that sees grief as necessary. See, you could see before when we talked about the Beaver's Timberlawn scale, is that in a healthy family, is feelings are given respect. They're not given privilege, but they're given respect. And people are encouraged to express and to share whatever is going on with them. In unhealthy relationships, then when a partner starts to share their feelings, the other person, sometimes out of being concerned about them, unintentionally starts to dismiss that person and tell them that they're going to be okay. Or in a relationship where there's more harshness or what we would call emotional abuse, the other person becomes disapproving. How can you feel that way? And starts to be judgmental and shaming about it. But in a healthy relationship, there's room for us to say whatever it is and to experience whatever we're experiencing without there being any kind of an evaluation or judgment from the other person. A healthy relationship is when partners never ask the other to change. Everybody's out there going, "Oh my God, how do you do that? How do you not ask somebody to change when they're doing something that you don't like?" Well, Kempler suggests you learn how to stir them in that direction instead of demanding it. What you do is you create an invitation to change, not a demand. A healthy relationship is when neither person in the relationship accepts that which is not given with an open hand. What does that mean? That means if I ask you to do something and you don't want to do it and you say, okay, but you're begrudging about it, if I was asking Brian to do something and he really didn't want to do it, instead of me saying, all right, well, thanks, which means then I accept him compromising himself and erasing himself and losing himself. I say to him, Brian, I don't want you to do it that way. I'd rather you not lose yourself than to give me what I want at this point in time. I care more about you than getting what I want. If we love someone, we don't take something from them that they don't want to give us. Boy, if you could just plug that in. Now, the other side of that coin is also true, is you don't give somebody something that you're not ready to give. If it isn't and I want to, I'd like to, I will, then don't bother unless you can convert your no into that yes. You're not doing yourself a favor and you're not doing the relationship a favor if you give things you don't want to give or if you accept things that aren't wanting to be given to you. It starts to create a real cancer in the relationship. A healthy relationship is when each can turn to the other for what is most needed. And when it is not available, to be able to appreciate what is. Boy, if you can plug this into your life, it will make an unbelievable difference. Couples come up to me all the time when I'm working with them, and let's say somebody says, well, how do I do that? If I want to have sex with my partner, I say, God, honey, I'd really, really like to be intimate and have sex with you tonight. And your partner says, no. Well, what can you do in that situation? What is there left to appreciate? And my answer to them, because it's a sincere question, we don't know how to do this, but there's always something available for us to appreciate. The fact that your partner said no to you and is honest rather than losing themselves is an incredible gift. They're giving you integrity. They're keeping their integrity in a relationship. And that means a lot. I remember this couple I worked with that turned to each other during a horrendous crisis in their life where they were both, completely devastated by the loss of their child. And, each wanted support from the other, and neither of them had that to give. And what they were able to appreciate is that they were on the same page, that they were both devastated, and they could sit in their misery together and use that as their connection rather than what they were hoping to get was some support from the other person. And finally, before I open this up for Tom to come in and share his thoughts about these ideas, is a healthy relationship is when love is not a plan nor a commitment, but only a consequence of who we are to each other. When love is not a plan nor a commitment, but only a consequence of who we are to each other. Well, I hope you can appreciate the richness of these ideas that Dr. Kempler shared with me. He was one of the pioneers in family and couples therapy, in our last century, and was a brilliant, masterful clinician.
We can just start opening up for questions if that works for you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Quick question. Don't mean to be the devil's advocate, even though it's going to sound like I am. Um, Marriage vows. I got married, and I remember when we were getting married, and talking about the vows. And I said, "Oh, the vows, the vows." And my husband looked at me and he said, "Those are important. That when you're not feeling it, that's what those are about." And I always appreciated that,
Hmm.
that that was the vow, the commitment, sickness, health. So 25 years later, when I asked him to depart, it was vow related. And when you started talking, excuse my puppy, he likes to squeak his thing. Um, when you started saying you shouldn't, should, isn't a vow a should?
Yeah.
Okay.
It is. See, that's the problem with it. See, it's okay. See, he's not and this is I think I'm putting some of my spin on this, but see, it's not that we don't make a commitment. It's just that we make a commitment because we want to, not because we should. And see, and that's where and what do you do when you don't? Well, then you struggle with that. Then you have to take on that struggle very honestly. And you have to say, I'm losing it here for whatever reason. I'm not feeling the same way about you as I want to feel. And I want to talk to you about it because if this keeps going, I don't like where my head starts to go with this. See, that's the kind of commitment that I think of in a relationship that I'm committed to bringing my experience, my authenticity to you and to see what we can do with that. Now, I have a lot of faith that if people show up like that, that it's, let me say this and put it in a context. Every relationship is going to go through a period of disillusionment. It has to. We can't stay the same as we were when we came together. We all change. And of course, and that makes, and thank God for it. Wouldn't it be boring if everything was the same all the time? Right? If there was no difference in, let's say, a hamburger. There's some burgers that are better than other burgers. Somebody can cook, ribs in a way that, man, I just want other ribs I want to throw out. I don't want to eat. So nothing's going to be the same. And that's a good thing, except if I don't know how to flow with that change, if my security is coming from keeping it the same, then I'm in trouble. I remember these two authors that went through, and if they're both of their husbands had affairs. They're both very famous women writers and write about a lot of women's issues. I can't remember their names right now. And they were doing this podcast about the gift of betrayal, is what they called it. And they were talking about, like, my God, what was their experience? What was the bottom line that they had when they really sat down to kind of unpack the experience? And they both came to the same aha. They said we had this expectation that you could take today and copy it and paste it into tomorrow and it would be the same. And they said that was such a setup because it prevented them from seeing the nuances from day to day and how things were changing with their partner that they didn't want to pay attention to. So before I said every relationship is going through a period of disillusionment. Well, that can be a good thing because a lot of times we start our relationships off with a big fantasy about who we think that other person is going to be. And then, of course, they never live up to it because the fantasy is more about us than it's about them. And so it's okay. But a lot of people, when they hit that disillusion, they throw in a towel and they run, they get divorced. And okay, that's a choice. I'm not judging that. But there's also an incredible value to hanging in there and seeing what's possible today. That's the kind of presence I'm talking about in a relationship.
Hello. Thanks for that. That was really an interesting half hour lecture that could be used at any marriage prep course.
Couldn't it?
You know, 1 week at a time for each one of your sentences. That was great. But that's what I was sort of alluding to. I didn't know any of that at the age of 21, and neither did my husband at the time, 25. I mean, that was to stand here now and to make that same vow with that man would probably be probably more loving and more kind after these years of divorce and separation than they were on the day of our wedding.
Look at that. Wow. That says a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah. I didn't
Wow.
have a clue as when I walked down that aisle. I
Yeah.
didn't have a clue as to anything of what you just said.
Yeah.
They really shouldn't have allowed it. And in my ceremony, the Friday night before, they said, and you will obey him.
Yes. How
Ay,
about
ay, ay. The whole wedding party said, I guess this is off.
that? They knew you, huh?
What are we going to do now? And I had to agree to that, which, like I said beforehand, I really, can we just cut this out? This is not going to, I can't. But the whole shebang, it was.
Well, some of those ideas are so well oppressive, first of all, obviously. I mean, they don't leave room for two people at all. I mean, I used to object.
Yeah, I always say my dad had to give away 2 cows for me because just somebody would take me. Jeez.
I well, thank you for sharing that, Annalise. There was a lot
Well,
of
that's just, yeah. Thank you for, I wish you would have been there 35 years ago, but
well, it's something too that we do have to come to through our experience too, don't we?
mhm.
Sometimes experience, no matter how we're told these things, we have to live some of these our reality and then start to understand the importance of these things.
But I wasn't really told any of those sentences of what you just said.
I know. I wasn't raised with that either.
No,
I was
no.
raised with a lot of shoulds, a lot of ideas that, till death do us part, all of these kinds of things that created more of a hostage situation in a marriage.
Yeah. It's when I ran away and there was a dog convention in town and I couldn't get a motel room. Okay. Anyway, I'll let you go. Thank you kindly.
Thank you, Annalise.
Hi, Alice, and yes, and I'm sorry, I'm not on camera. I'm laying here in the bed, but thank you so much for this forum. This is really good. But I want to say something really, really quick.
Yes.
And I'm just not meeting people like this. I'm not meeting people getting this type of, oh my God,
Thank
awareness.
I,
12, this emotional sobriety, 12 steps, all this stuff that I'm you know, receiving through, various platforms, I just don't run into people that, have this awareness. So, what good is it? If I can't marry anybody who, they don't understand like I understand today. And just
yeah.
like Annalise said, good point. She had no clue about this stuff back then. And like now, even now, I don't meet people on a daily basis. These people out here crazy. I just don't meet it. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say. I don't know
Well,
if you can
yeah,
address that.
I can say something to that. See, we've one of the things that we know without a doubt, and Bill even realized this back when he wrote um, the 12 and 12, when he said, if we practice the principles of the 12 steps in our daily life, he goes that we and those about us. Now, that's the phrase that I want to key in on. We and those about us find emotional sobriety. And other people like Dr. Bowen, Byron Katie, um, almost anyone says, I'm thinking of Harriet Lerner now. Once we start to raise our differentiation and maturity, that we change the dance in any relationship. And so while you may not meet someone, if you're in relationship, and as Kempler said, if we demonstrate, like he says, when personal language is the cornerstone of conversation, taught, appreciated, and encouraged, but through example, not through preaching. You guys have probably heard Herb say there was this old saint that said, everywhere I go, I preach the gospel. He says, and sometimes I use words. Everywhere I go, I preach the
Yeah.
gospel. Sometimes, see, be what you are, and you will now, when in your relationships, you will bring that relationship to a higher level of consciousness.
Oh, okay. So get into a relationship with an idiot to bring them into the
Idiots.
level of
I,
consciousness.
I, I was one of those idiots that there's hope for idiots too. Come on now.
Okay.
Don't have a bias towards us idiots. There's a lot of us here that have grown.
Okay. All right. All right.
I got a lot smarter once I realized what an idiot I was.
Okay. All right. Thank
Tom,
you.
Tom, you're back. Rutledge, you were doing the disappearing act. What the heck happened, man? It's like
You're
you're
still
there
muted, Tom.
and you're still muted. And you're muted. We can't hear you.
Uh, all
There
right.
you go.
There we go. Yeah. Yeah. My internet dropped me and I hit my head.
Oh my God. And that's why
Yeah.
you're
But
not on anymore.
that's why I'm here. But sorry, I missed a lot of that. So,
Okay.
but
But we're just taking questions now from people that have
good,
very.
good, 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 good. I'll get out of the way.
All right. Kelly's next.
Hi, Kelly. Thank you so much. Yeah, this is like a lot of good stuff. My primary relationship is, with my teenage daughter. Can this like be, maneuvered to, interact with my teenage daughter?
Yes, very much so. Very much so. I love that question, and I love where your mind is going. Like, how can I apply this in my relationship with her? And a lot of these things hold very, very true, especially the personal language, right? Because a lot of parenting is trying to control our kids, right? Instead of trying to just meet them. My dear friend Jesper Yule, he was the director of the Kempler Institute in Denmark, where I spent many, many years going over there and training therapists. And Jesper wrote a wonderful book called Your Competent Child. Probably, Denmark's a small country, but it sold over 1 million copies in Denmark. And I think there's only a couple million, maybe 6 million people, like sixth of the population read his book. And for good reason, because what he was saying is that our job as parents is not to control our kids, it is to guide them. And in a way, he was challenging all of this child rearing that has to do with shame and control. And instead of being able to see our children and see what their deepest desires are and speak to them at that level. And so what you're kind of anticipating in terms of what you can do with your daughter is right on.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I really resonated with the show by example and um I really, also like the compromise is a cheap form of cooperation. Um and if they say no, they are giving you integrity. Um and also try and, get them on board as an opportunity, right? So
Yeah.
how can I, how can I do this with my daughter?
Yeah. Well, like you said, if you start to do it by example, she's going to be, very much touched and influenced by the kind of energy you create.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. This is good stuff.
Yes, I just have a question about repeating something that you said, Alan. And it was the sentence before the relationships is when love is not a plan nor a commitment. There was one that you had before that. Are you able to?
Yeah, I can bring you back to that. It was when we turn when each can turn to the other for what is needed and not get it and appreciate what is available. So I turn to you and say, I really want this from you right now. And you say, no, I don't want to do that right now, Alan. I'm not interested. And instead of being mad at you and saying, what kind of a partner are you? Are you kidding me? What kind of a marriage is this? Trying to pressure you to do what I want you to do because I can't deal with the no. I'm a big baby, right? I got to get my way. So I'm going to try to manipulate you into being what I want you to be. Instead of doing that, if I create room for you to say no, then when you say yes, it's going to be so much better.
Got it.
And
Beautiful.
see,
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
such a powerful thing, and we don't realize that, is that
Not trying to put you in the middle.
the richness of the no will create a richness in a yes. And that's what we've got to understand. And that's why no's need to be honored just like we honor a yes.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just would like to bring up a suggestion. You said to be able to increase our tolerance for discomfort and anxiety. That might be a good topic sometime.
Oh, yes, it would be. Without Valium, we should say. We've got to add, we got to add that to increase our tolerance because none of us like to be uncomfortable. I mean, I get that. I get that a lot. The problem, and we all see this, is the more you give anxiety or fear privilege, the more your life becomes controlled by it. Right? And that's the problem. See, the big difference is, and people kind of confuse this, is feelings are to be respected but not given privilege. I love that one line that Brandon had, is it's very important not to believe that feelings are an infallible guide to the truth. So just because I'm afraid of walking into a situation doesn't mean that when I walk into that situation, I'm not going to be okay. I might be able to walk in that situation. I'm sure you've had this, is what you've anticipated didn't turn out to be the reality. It turns out oftentimes never to be as bad as my mind makes it out to be. I mean, it's thank God for that. I'm grateful for that one, right?
Mhm.
But I think that's the kind of relation we can respect that I feel this way, but I don't want to give it power over me.
Okay,
So we will put that into consideration, Kathy. I love your suggestion.
put it in the hopper.
Yes, we'll put it in the hopper.